The Vatican is now taking its first serious steps against a group of monks who have shaken the very foundations of the Catholic Church. A letter, written not in anger but in conviction, has set off shockwaves across the religious world. The monks who once lived in silence and obedience have raised their voices in open defiance. Their message was simple, yet thunderous. They no longer recognize the so-called synodal church as truly Catholic. In their eyes, what is being presented as renewal and dialogue is in fact a dangerous change, a mutation that threatens the ancient faith passed down by the fathers of the Church. This moment is more than a disagreement. It is a turning point, a moment that may set a historic precedent. What happens next will show how the Church chooses to face rebellion, whether with compassion and dialogue or with authority and punishment. Across monasteries and cathedrals, priests and believers are watching closely, for this event could open a deep fracture that the Church has never seen before. Far from the noise of Rome, on the quiet and windswept islands of New Zealand, a group of monks known as the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer have broken their silence. These are men who once lived a life of contemplation and prayer, hidden from the world. Yet now their voices echo across continents. They have written an open letter, strong, uncompromising, and filled with sorrow. Within its lines, they declare that they can no longer be part of what they call a new church that has turned away from the truth. The letter spread like fire. Within hours, it appeared on Catholic websites, social media pages, and discussion forums. Some readers saw the monks as heroes, brave defenders of the ancient faith. Others called them rebels, schismatics, and even traitors. But behind the noise of opinions lies something far more serious, a spiritual storm that is testing the heart of Catholic identity itself. In monasteries where silence once reigned, there is now unrest. In parishes and seminaries, people whisper questions they never dared to ask before. What does it mean to be faithful? To obey authority, or to defend the truth even if it leads to disobedience? For centuries, the Church has taught that obedience is a virtue. But what happens when obedience seems to conflict with the faith itself? That is the question burning in the hearts of these monks and many who watch them.
The Vatican's reaction came swiftly. Bishop Hugh Gilbert, the ordinary of the Diocese of Aberdeen in Scotland, where the order's mother house is located, released an official statement. Calm but firm, he distanced himself from the monks' letter, saying that its tone and message could not be accepted within the unity of the Church. His statement expressed sorrow and concern. He asked for prayers, for peace, for understanding, but his actions spoke louder. The diocese announced that while the traditional Latin Mass would continue to be celebrated, it would do so under the direct supervision of the diocese, not the monks. To the outside world, this looked like a reasonable decision, an effort to preserve stability. But within the Church, those who know its language understood what it really meant. The monks were being quietly removed from their role. Their independence was being stripped away. And behind these careful diplomatic words, Rome had already begun a deeper process, a canonical and doctrinal investigation. When the Holy See says it is studying a case, it usually means it is preparing to take disciplinary action. Bishop Hugh Gilbert, himself a Benedictine monk known for his humility and calm spirit, ended his message with a call to prayer. Prayer for unity, prayer for the Church, prayer for those in conflict. Yet even in his gentle tone, one could feel the tension beneath. The rift is real, The division is visible. What was once hidden behind cloister walls has now become public. Many Catholics, both clergy and lay people, now wonder whether this is the beginning of a new conflict within the Church, a battle between progressives who seek change and traditionalists who hold fast to the past. But beyond appearances, something much deeper is at work. This is not just about liturgy or new pastoral language. It is about the soul of the Church itself. It is about whether the Church can remain united while walking two different paths, one rooted in eternal tradition, the other in adaptation to the modern world. At the center of the monks' letter are 15 bold statements, 15 points that they describe as lines that cannot be crossed. In these, they reject several teachings and reforms that they believe have betrayed the truth of the gospel. They reject Amoris Laetitia, the papal document that
allows communion for people living in irregular unions. They condemn Traditionis Custodes, which limits the celebration of the ancient Tridentine Mass. They criticize Fiducia Supplicans, which opens the door to blessings for couples living outside the traditional view of marriage. But they do not stop there. They go further, rejecting the document on human fraternity, which declares that God wills the diversity of religions. For the monks, such words contradict the very heart of the Christian faith. They see them not as expressions of dialogue, but as confusion. They denounce what they call the synodal church, describing it as a human creation distinct from the divine church established by Christ. In their letter, they recall past scandals, the worship of the Pachamama statues, which they call idolatry, and the growing acceptance of religious relativism. Abolish the Mass, they write, quoting Martin Luther, and you destroy the Church. For them, the Mass is not just a ritual, it is the living heart of the faith, the one thing that binds heaven and earth, and so they draw a final line, either Christ or the world. Their words are strong, unbending, and at their core lies a single conviction. Disobedience can sometimes be an act of higher obedience. They quote the Apostle Paul saying, "Even if an angel from heaven preaches a gospel different from the one we have preached, let him be accursed." For them, these are not just verses, they are a declaration of war, a spiritual war against what they see as the corruption of truth. In their closing paragraphs, the monks speak like soldiers on a battlefield. We cannot remain silent, they write. We will obey God rather than men. Their tone is not angry, but solemn. They write as men who believe they are defending something sacred, something eternal. They speak of the Good Shepherd who gives his life for his sheep, and warn of the wolves that threaten the flock. And in their view, those wolves now wear the garments of authority. This is the painful heart of the crisis. Authority and truth, two pillars that have long stood together, now seem to face each other as enemies. For centuries, the faithful have looked to Rome as the guardian of truth. But what happens when some of those faithful begin to feel that Rome itself has changed? What happens when monks, who once swore vows of silence and obedience, feel compelled to speak out against the very structure they vowed to serve? In every corner of the Catholic world, people are watching. Some fear the monks have gone too far. Others see them as the voice of conscience crying out in the wilderness. Many priests, religious brothers, and ordinary believers quietly agree with parts of their message, even if they dare not say it aloud. What was once a small whisper has now become a movement of the heart, a longing for the stability of truth in a time of confusion. But the Vatican cannot ignore this. The Church cannot simply allow open defiance to go unanswered. Rome must respond, and soon.
Yet how it chooses to respond will determine much more than the fate of one small community in New Zealand. It will reveal the direction of the entire church. If Rome chooses punishment, it risks creating martyrs, men seen by many as heroes of faith, persecuted for their fidelity to tradition. If it chooses reconciliation, it must face the uncomfortable reality that many of the monks' criticisms are shared by a growing number of believers worldwide. Either path carries danger. Either path could change the church forever. For now, the Vatican has chosen silence, a silence filled with meaning. Behind closed doors, theologians and cardinals debate what to do. Should they issue a formal condemnation? Should they attempt dialogue? Or should they simply wait, hoping that time will cool the fire? But those who know history understand that silence does not extinguish a flame. It often allows it to spread, and the flame is spreading. From monasteries in Europe to small chapels in America, from seminaries in Africa to convents in Asia, people are discussing the monk's letter. Some print it, read it in groups, and reflect on its words. Others denounce it as rebellion. But in either case, it has captured attention. What began as a single letter from a remote island has now become a test for the Church's unity. The sons of the Most Holy Redeemer have forced
The Vatican to look in the mirror, to ask whether the modern reforms meant to renew the Church have instead created division. The story of these monks is not just a passing episode. It is a mirror reflecting a larger wound that runs through the heart of the Church today. For many years, quiet tension has been building between those who wish to keep the ancient traditions alive and those who believe that the Church must adapt to modern times. For some, the reforms of recent years represent a bridge toward dialogue, understanding, and mercy. For others, these same reforms are a betrayal, a slow departure from the faith that once shaped saints and martyrs. Inside the monasteries of the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer, the tension had been growing for a long time. They had tried to remain silent, they had tried to obey. They celebrated the ancient Tridentine Mass, prayed in Latin, lived simple lives of prayer and work, and followed the old discipline of the Church. For them, faith was not something to be adjusted or modernized. It was something sacred, received from their fathers, to be preserved and passed on unchanged. But, over time, the monks began to feel that the walls were closing in. Each new document from Rome, each new instruction from bishops seemed to push them further toward the edge. The suppression of the old Mass, the growing acceptance of modern moral changes, and the new pastoral tone that seemed to blur the line between sin and virtue, all of it made them feel as though the very foundation of their faith was being replaced. When the Church they loved began to look, in their eyes, like something else, they reached their breaking point. The open letter they wrote was not a sudden act of anger. It was the result of years of silent struggle, years of trying to stay faithful while the world around them changed. In their hearts, they believed that to remain silent any longer would be to betray Christ himself. So they wrote. And when they wrote, they did not hold back. They wrote with sorrow, but also with a fierce conviction. Their words were simple, but their message was sharp. They accused the modern church of abandoning truth in the name of compassion. They spoke of the danger of calling sin by another name. They warned against a religion that tries too hard to please the world and ends up losing its soul. "We will obey God rather than men," declared. And those words carried a weight that Rome could not ignore. The Vatican, as always, moves carefully. It knows that every action it takes becomes a symbol for millions of believers. Condemnation can create division. Silence can be seen as weakness. Reconciliation can be mistaken for compromise. But in this case, the stakes are higher than usual. The monks' rebellion is not just a matter of local discipline. It is a sign of something global. A growing resistance that is spreading quietly among priests, religious, and lay people who feel alienated by the Church's direction. Across the Catholic world, there are priests who celebrate the Latin Mass in secret, lay groups who gather to pray the Rosary for the defense of tradition, and theologians who question the path
of the synodal church. What was once a few scattered voices is now forming into a network of quiet opposition. These monks from New Zealand have become, unwillingly, a symbol for all of them. In Scotland, where their mother house stands, the atmosphere is tense. Bishop Hugh Gilbert's statement was calm but final. The celebration of the Old Mass would continue, but under diocesan control. The monks, once entrusted with it, are now sidelined. It is a polite form of removal, the kind that happens in the church when discipline must be restored without public scandal. But everyone understands what it means. Their ministry is effectively over, at least for now. Meanwhile, in Rome, officials within the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith have begun reviewing the monk's letter. Canon lawyers are studying